Have you ever walked past an old abandoned house and felt like it was watching you? Most of us shrug it off, tell ourselves it's just our imagination. But what if the house really was alive, waiting for someone to step inside? Tonight, I'm going to tell you the story of Evelyn, a young woman who couldn't resist exploring a crumbling house deep in the woods. What she found inside wasn't just dust and broken furniture, it was something far darker, something that wanted her to stay forever. It started with a dare. Every small town has that one house. The place kids whisper about on the bus, the one parents warn you to stay away from, the one people cross the street to avoid after dark. In my town, that was the old Mercer place. The house had been abandoned for decades, its windows boarded up, its roof sagging under the weight of years, and its walls stained with watermarks like old scars. The stories about it were endless. Some said the last family inside had vanished without a trace, leaving dinner plates still on the table. Others swore they saw faces staring from the upper windows. And on certain nights when the wind blew just right, neighbors claimed to hear a woman screaming from somewhere deep inside the house. It was the kind of story that grows bigger every year, the kind kids dare each other to prove wrong. And one Friday night, sitting in Chris's garage with nothing but stale chips and flat soda, my best friend decided it was our turn. "Let's end it," Chris said, leaning back in his chair with that cocky grin he always wore when he was about to do something reckless. He tossed a flashlight toward me. "One night in the Mercer house. We film everything. After that, nobody can say we're scared little kids anymore." Daniel laughed nervously, shaking his head. "People disappear in there, man." Chris rolled his eyes. "People talk. Big difference. It's just an empty house with creaky floors. What's the worst that can happen?" The truth was, I wasn't the kind of person who chased after shadows. I preferred avoiding them, but something in Chris's tone made it impossible to back out. He had that way of making you feel like if you didn't go along, you'd regret it forever. So with a knot already forming in my stomach, I agreed. By midnight, the three of us were standing at the edge of the Mercer property. The street behind us was quiet, every house dark, as though the whole neighborhood held its breath. Even the air felt different here, colder, heavier, like the house itself exhaled a frost that touched your bones. The place looked worse up close. The porch sagged in the middle, the steps cracked under our weight, and the front door leaned crooked on rusted hinges. Paint had peeled away in jagged strips, leaving behind gray wood that looked diseased. We exchanged one last glance, a silent agreement that once we crossed this threshold, there was no turning back. Chris was the first to move. He shoved the door open and the sound echoed through the empty halls like a gunshot. Dust swirled in our flashlight beams and the smell hit us immediately, something rotten, damp, with a sour edge that made me gag. The wallpaper sagged in strips, curling away from the walls as if even it was trying to escape. We moved deeper, our laughter too loud, fake bravado spilling out in every word. But the act ended when Daniel froze at the base of the staircase. His flashlight beam caught something scrawled across the wall in jagged letters. "Leave while you can." Chris forced a laugh, but I noticed his hand tremble as he adjusted the beam. Then from above us, the floor creaked. Once, twice. The sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate. That's when it hit me. We weren't alone. Chris, being the boldest, or maybe just the most reckless, decided we had to go upstairs. "If someone's messing with us, that's where they are," he whispered, gripping his flashlight tighter. Neither Daniel nor I wanted to follow, but we weren't about to stay alone on the first floor either. The staircase groaned under our weight. Each step we took echoed into the silence like a warning. My heart thudded so hard I swore it would give us away. By the time we reached the landing, the air was different. Heavier, and it smelled stronger too, like rusted iron, sharp and metallic. The hallway stretched ahead, longer than it had looked from outside. Shadows seemed to cling to the walls, doors lining both sides like rows of teeth. Daniel muttered, "I don't like this. Something's wrong." But Chris had already pushed open the nearest door. Inside was a bedroom, untouched for decades. The bed sagged in the middle, its sheets yellowed and brittle. Cobwebs clung to the ceiling fan, but it was the doll in the corner that froze me in place. A porcelain thing, dressed in a torn little gown, one glass eye missing, its head tilted slightly to the side. We stepped inside cautiously, the floorboards creaking beneath us. And then, as if in response to our presence, the doll's head moved. Just a small tilt, but unmistakable. I stumbled back, flashlight jerking. For a moment the beam wavered, and when it settled, the doll was perfectly still again. Lifeless. Porcelain. "Dude," I hissed. "Did you see that?" Chris laughed, but it was too loud, too forced. "You're jumpy. Old houses do weird things." Still, his laugh cracked halfway through, and his eyes darted away from the doll like he didn't want to look at it again. We pressed on, unwilling to linger. At the far end of the hall stood a door unlike the others. It was heavier, darker, the wood scarred with deep scratches. Not random scratches either. These looked desperate, like someone had clawed at it trying to escape. Chris reached for the handle. "This is it," he whispered, like the door itself was the answer to some challenge. He pushed it open. The air inside was instantly colder. The room was nearly empty, except for a tall mirror leaning against the far wall. Its glass was cracked, but otherwise it looked ordinary. Still, something about it made my skin crawl. I stepped closer, unable to stop myself. The mirror reflected me, Daniel, and Chris, but the reflection wasn't quite right. My double didn't move when I did. Its eyes blinked on their own, slow and deliberate. Daniel cursed, bolting from the room. Chris and I followed, but just before I reached the door, I felt it. A voice, low, close, almost brushing against my ear. It whispered one word, "Stay." And it wasn't Chris. It wasn't Daniel. It was the house. We tore down the stairs like animals fleeing a predator, our footsteps pounding so loud it felt like the house itself was shaking. In the chaos, Daniel slipped on the last step and crashed hard onto the floor below. His flashlight clattered away, rolling across the wood until its beam flickered against the wall. Daniel's scream echoed through the empty rooms, but it wasn't from the fall. His eyes locked on the writing we had seen earlier, and my stomach flipped. The words had changed. What once read, "Leave while you can," now stretched across the wall in jagged, dripping strokes. "You can't leave." It was fresh, wet, almost as if it had been written in blood just moments before. Chris grabbed Daniel by the arm, hauling him up. His voice, usually so cocky, cracked with panic. "We're getting out, now." He yanked open the front door and we all froze. The porch, the street, the neighborhood, everything we expected to see was gone. In its place stretched an endless wall of fog, thick and suffocating. It swirled like smoke, rolling and twisting, as if it had been waiting for us. "Shut it," I hissed. Chris slammed the door, then flung it open again, hoping maybe it was some trick of our eyes. But the fog was still there, stretching forever, devouring the world outside. The house had sealed us in. A heavy silence filled the air, pressing on my ears. And then, faint at first, came the sound of footsteps. Not ours, something slower, heavier. The boards creaked as though someone unseen moved across them. Then came the dragging, a long, horrible scrape, like something sharp being pulled across the floor in the kitchen. Chris raised his flashlight, his hand trembling. The beam flickered, stuttering in the thick darkness. For a moment I caught a glimpse of something, a figure moving at the far edge of the light. It was tall, too tall, its limbs bent at strange angles, crawling across the floor like a spider forced into human shape. Its face, I couldn't see it clearly, only the shadow of something wrong, something too smooth where features should have been. Daniel whimpered, clutching my sleeve. "What is that?" I couldn't answer. My throat had closed up, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard it hurt. "Upstairs," Chris whispered hoarsely. "We'll block the door. We'll be safe." But even as the words left his mouth, the dragging grew louder, faster. Whatever it was coming closer. The sound circled us, echoing through the walls as though the house itself carried its steps. Then, from the shadows, a voice rose. Not one voice, but many, deep, layered, whispering in unison, filling the house with a sound that made my skin crawl. "You belong here." The lights of our flashlights sputtered once, then dimmed, and for the first time I realized this wasn't just about surviving the night. The house wanted us. Evelyn stumbled out of the basement, her body trembling as if the cold from below had seeped into her bones. She slammed the heavy wooden door shut and twisted the rusted lock into place, but it hardly gave her comfort. The house was alive with whispers now. Every wall, every hallway seemed to carry voices too faint to understand, yet too sharp to ignore. She leaned against the cracked plaster wall, breathing hard. Her phone's flashlight flickered again, and this time it didn't recover. The screen went black, swallowing her in darkness. Panic surged. She groped for the matches she'd found in the kitchen drawer earlier, her hands shaking so badly that 3 sticks snapped before she finally struck one into life. The tiny flame hissed and painted the room in trembling orange. The matchlight revealed something Evelyn hadn't noticed before. Faint chalk markings smeared across the hallway walls. Circles, crosses, strange sigils that looked half erased by time but still pulsed with meaning. She ran the flame closer. Some marks were drawn in chalk, yes, but others had been carved deep, like someone desperate to etch warnings into the very bones of the house. A sudden gust extinguished the flame, plunging her back into darkness. Evelyn froze. She hadn't opened a door, hadn't felt a draft. The air in the hall was still, but she knew something else was moving, something she could not see. Her instincts screamed at her to leave, but her feet carried her toward the stairwell. She climbed slowly, gripping the wooden railing that groaned under her weight. At the top of the stairs, the corridor stretched longer than before, as if the house itself had shifted while she was in the basement. At the far end, a dim light glowed beneath a door. Unlike the others, this one wasn't coated in dust or mildew. It looked used recently. Evelyn's throat tightened. She should have run, but curiosity, dread, and that strange compulsion that had driven her since stepping inside forced her forward. Each step creaked louder than the last. The whispers grew clearer, forming fragmented words she didn't want to understand. She reached the glowing door, heart hammering against her ribs. The brass knob was warm to the touch, almost feverish, as if someone had been holding it moments ago. She pushed it open. Inside was a child's bedroom, untouched by time. Toys scattered across a small rug. A dollhouse stood neatly against the wall. The wallpaper showed happy scenes of blue skies and clouds. But every toy, every decoration, every surface was covered in a thin layer of ash. And on the bed sat the little girl from the photo, her head tilted, eyes shining white in the dim light. She smiled slowly, revealing teeth far too sharp. "Welcome home," she whispered. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. The girl's words echoed in the room, soft yet heavy, as if they carried the weight of every secret the house had buried. "Welcome home." The match slipped from Evelyn's trembling hand and fell to the floor, sputtering into darkness. She fumbled for another, struck it against the box, and the flame's glow revealed the child still perched on the bed, grinning, her eyes glowing like twin lanterns. "This isn't your home," Evelyn whispered, her voice cracked. She backed toward the door, but it slammed shut with a force that rattled the walls. The girl tilted her head further, her neck bending at an unnatural angle. "You came looking," the girl murmured. Her voice seemed to echo from all corners of the room, layered and distorted. "Now you can't leave." Evelyn's pulse thundered in her ears. She turned and grabbed at the doorknob, yanking with all her strength, but it was locked tight. Behind her, the air grew colder, and the whispers she'd heard throughout the house rose into a chorus of laughter and screams. Shadows rippled along the wallpaper, forming shapes of figures. Men, women, children, trapped in endless suffering. The girl slid off the bed, her bare feet making no sound on the ashen rug. As she stepped closer, Evelyn saw that her dress was scorched at the hem, as though burned by fire long ago. The smell of smoke filled the room, choking her lungs. Evelyn struck another match with shaking hands, holding it out like a shield. The girl stopped, her smile widening as though amused. The flame flickered violently, and suddenly the entire room shifted. The wallpaper peeled away, revealing charred beams and blackened walls. The dollhouse collapsed into ash. The toys melted into puddles of wax-like sludge. Evelyn was no longer in a child's room. She was standing in the middle of a burned-out chamber, the air thick with smoke and despair. The girl's form blurred. twisting into a shadow taller than Evelyn, its limbs stretching unnaturally, its face hollow yet grinning with rows of jagged teeth. Evelyn staggered back, her mind screaming to wake up, to escape, but her body wouldn't obey. "Stay," the voice hissed, filling the chamber. They all stay. In a final act of desperation, Evelyn hurled the lit match at the figure. Flames erupted across the ash-covered floor, roaring upward in a wave of fire. The shadow screeched, the voices crying out in agony. Evelyn covered her face and threw herself at the door with every ounce of strength left in her. This time it burst open. She tumbled into the hallway, smoke pouring behind her. She ran, stumbling down the stairs, through the twisted halls until she burst out into the night air. The house stood silent, its windows glowing faintly as if watching her. Evelyn collapsed onto the overgrown lawn, gasping for breath. The night was calm again, the woods eerily quiet. But as she stared back at the house, she swore she could still see the little girl standing at the upstairs window, smiling, waiting. And Evelyn knew no one ever truly left that house. And that's how Evelyn learned the truth. Some houses don't just hold memories, they hold on to the living. She escaped with her life, but not with her peace of mind. Because every night since, she swears she sees that little girl watching from the shadows, smiling, waiting for her to come back. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more chilling tales. And tell me in the comments, would you have stepped into that house? Or turned and walked away?